The first thing Judith noticed that morning was the way the door of apartment 33 didn't fully close, just a small gap, a sliver of quiet light spilling into the hallway like an invitation she wasn't meant to touch. It was barely noticeable, but for her, it felt like a mirror of her own life, not fully open, not fully shut, suspended in a place where nothing truly belonged to her. She stood in the doorway of her parents' apartment, listening to the hum of the old air conditioning, her suitcase still unpacked even after 3 weeks. The air smelled faintly of detergent and overcooked oatmeal. She felt 24 going on 14 again. She inhaled slowly, letting the silence settle, and the crack of the door next to hers tugged at her attention. Something about it made her chest tighten, not with fear, but with the ache of possibilities she'd never allowed herself to imagine. The corridor's early morning light had that pale, almost nostalgic quality. If she stepped back into her parents' expectations, she feared she'd turn to glass and shatter. Then footsteps echoed. Soft, steady, confident. A woman appeared in front of the half-open door of 33. She carried a box in her arms, curly dark blonde hair tied in a loose knot, some strands escaping, catching sunlight like threads of gold. She wore jeans that had paint stains on them and a loose cream sweater that slid off one shoulder in a way that felt unintentional, effortless. She looked about 28, maybe 29, older, but not in a way that felt distant. More in a way that said she'd seen enough of life to stop fearing her own shadow. She pushed the door open with her hip, the hinges creaking in a tone Judith had never heard before in this building. The woman laughed quietly at the stubborn door, a soft, warm sound that spread through the hallway with surprising ease. Judith froze, hands gripping her coffee mug too tightly. A tiny emotional tremor passed through her, like static, subtle but impossible to ignore. She tried to look away, but something about the woman made her want to stay perfectly still, as if any movement might break the scene. Their eyes met. It was only a second, maybe less, but it felt like someone had turned the dimmer switch up in Judith's chest. The woman lifted her chin slightly in a silent hello, friendly, open, sure of herself in a way Judith couldn't even pretend to be. "Morning," the woman said, voice low, warm, textured like soft fabric. Judith swallowed. "Hi." Her own voice sounded too careful, too practiced, like she was afraid it might give away more than she intended. The woman smiled, a real smile, one that touched her eyes, and disappeared into the apartment, leaving the door finally closed behind her. Judith stared at the now shut door, her heart thudding quietly. The gap was gone, but something else had opened inside her, a faint crack, barely there, yet unmistakably real. Later that afternoon, she brought a basket of laundry downstairs to the shared laundry room, trying to distract herself from the memory of that smile. The room smelled of warm cotton and lavender softener, and sunlight filtered through the dusty window, painting squares of golden light on the tiled floor. Judith liked coming here when no one was around. It was one of the few spaces where she didn't feel watched by her parents' expectations. She loaded her clothes into a machine, the metal cool against her trembling fingertips. The repetitive motion steadied her breathing. And then the door opened behind her. "Oh, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt your piece," a voice said, familiar in a way that made her pulse skip. Judith turned. It was the woman from apartment 33. She carried a small basket and a bottle of jasmine detergent whose scent floated instantly across the room. Judith recognized her now, something in her posture, the controlled ease, the spark behind her eyes. She was the type of person who didn't shrink to fit a space, she expanded gently, naturally. "You're from 32, right?" the woman asked, leaning slightly against a washing machine. "I saw you this morning." Judith nodded too quickly. "Yeah. I'm Judith." "And," the woman said. "Nice to officially meet you." Anne's smile lingered a second longer this time. Judith felt warmth crawl up her neck, but it wasn't embarrassment exactly. It was something else, something that had been asleep inside her for years. And started loading her laundry, humming softly to herself, a tune Judith didn't recognize but found strangely soothing. She moved with an easy grace, her sweater sleeves pushed up to reveal freckled forearms. Judith found herself watching more than she should, drawn to the intimacy of ordinary gestures, the way Anne tucked her hair behind her ear, the way she pressed her thumb into the detergent cap before pouring it in. A brief silence settled, soft as dust in the light. Then Anne spoke again. "So, are you new here too?" Judith hesitated, the weight of her truth pressing against her ribs. "Kind of. I moved back. Temporarily." Anne's eyes softened. "Ah. One of those moves." Judith let out a breath that wasn't quite a laugh. "Exactly." Something unspoken passed between them, not pity, not curiosity, but recognition. As if Anne could sense the heaviness Judith carried without needing to pry. That alone made Judith feel strangely seen. The machine rumbled to life, filling the room with a low, vibrating sound. The smell of jasmine mixed with warm air. Judith brushed her hair behind her shoulder, feeling suddenly exposed, like the light was too direct. And stepped closer, not invading, just shifting her presence. "If you ever want to escape the temporary part, I make a mean cup of chamomile tea." Judith blinked. "Oh. That's nice of you." "It's mostly selfish," Anne said lightly. "I don't know anyone in the building yet. Thought it'd be good to make at least one ally." Judith felt the corner of her mouth lift. "I've never been anyone's ally before." "You look like you could be a great one." The words landed deeper than Anne probably intended. Judith looked away quickly, her chest tightening with something warm and unsettling. The window caught her eye, the same pale sunlight now turning a shade softer, as if acknowledging that something had shifted. A small silence grew again, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Judith felt it wrap around them like a thin, invisible thread. Then Anne's fingers brushed the edge of the machine near Judith's hand, just an inch away, not a touch, but dangerously close. The kind of closeness that makes you acutely aware of your own skin. Judith's breath caught. Anne noticed. Her lashes lowered just slightly, her voice dropping to something gentle. "I didn't mean to overwhelm you." "You didn't," Judith whispered, surprising herself with how honest it sounded. And straightened subtly, giving Judith space once more, but the air between them stayed warm, charged with possibility. She picked up her empty laundry basket and rested her hip lightly against the machine. "Maybe I'll see you around," Anne said, half-smile returning, softer this time. Judith nodded, unable to find her words for a moment. "Yeah. You will." And turned to leave, the scent of jasmine trailing in her wake. She paused at the doorway, glanced back just once, an unspoken question flickering in her eyes, and then walked out, the door swinging shut with a whisper that felt almost like a promise. Judith stood alone in the laundry room, heart steady but awake in a way it hadn't been in years. She wasn't sure what had just begun between them, but as the washing machine hummed and sunlight tilted across the floor, she felt that small crack inside her widen, not painfully, but like something finally letting the light in. She reached out, fingertips brushing the spot where Anne's hand had been moments before, and let out a slow breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Something had shifted. Quietly. Irrevocably. And Judith knew, without fully understanding why, that this was only the beginning. The hallway had started to feel different to Judith, less like a sterile passage between closed doors and more like a space holding its breath. Each morning, she found herself listening for the soft click of Anne's lock turning or the gentle thud of her boots on the carpet. Small things, quiet things, that somehow rearranged the air in ways she didn't know how to name. One Saturday, Judith stepped out of her apartment balancing 2 grocery bags, and the scent of something warm, cinnamon, maybe, floated from under Anne's door. Before she could think too much about it, the door opened. Anne stood there in leggings and an oversized gray t-shirt, her hair tied up in an intentionally messy bun, a smudge of flour on her cheek. "Morning, neighbor," and said, voice playful, as if they'd known each other much longer than a few days. Judith's eyes instinctively met hers, but the warmth there made her look away just slightly. "Morning. Are you baking?" "Trying to," and laughed, lifting a tray of croissants that looked slightly uneven but smelled heavenly. "Want one?" Judith hesitated only because she always hesitated, but the buttery scent wrapped around her like a soft tug. Sure. Yes." And stepped aside. "Come in while they cool down. Unless you have somewhere to be." Judith shook her head too quickly. "No. I don't." The apartment felt like it breathed differently than the rest of the building. Sunlight poured in through the windows, catching the dust in the air like tiny stars. Paintings leaned against one wall, some half-finished. A faint smell of bergamot floated through the room from a candle flickering on the counter. "This place is beautiful," Judith said softly, setting her groceries down beside the door. Still fixing it up, and replied, brushing hair from her forehead. "But thanks. It's starting to feel like mine." Judith envied that, the sense of claiming a space, shaping it with your presence. She walked slowly toward the kitchen island, brushing her fingertips along the smooth wood. The touch grounded her. "Do you like cinnamon?" and asked. "I do." "Good. These have too much cinnamon, but maybe that makes them better." Their eyes met again. Judith felt a shift in her breath, a slow flutter near her ribs. She took a croissant fragment from Anne's hand, their fingers almost touching, almost. Heat rushed through her at the proximity, a small jolt that surprised her with its intensity. She brought the piece to her lips and the warm, buttery sweetness filled her mouth. "Wow," she said softly. "This is really good." And leaned against the counter, her voice dropping into something teasing. "Careful." That sounded dangerously enthusiastic. Judith laughed, the sound escaping before she could restrain it. And there it was again, the sense that with Anne, her edges softened, her guard loosened without permission. But not everything in her life was softening. Her parents had been circling her like storm clouds, mentioning responsibilities, proper paths, church obligations, and interviews she should prioritize. Their house felt like a museum where she wasn't allowed to breathe too loudly. Coming back had always been temporary, but they didn't seem to understand that. The next obstacle came wrapped in a polite invitation, a family dinner next week, mandatory, with relatives who asked too many questions and offered too many opinions. Judith's chest tightened at the thought. She didn't mention it to Anne, not yet, but the tension sat under her skin like a faint humming. After breakfasting on croissants, Judith helped Anne move a piece of furniture, a small bookshelf she wanted near the window. The light streamed through the glass, warm and golden, illuminating Anne's profile as she pushed one end of the shelf. Judith lifted the other, their shoulders nearly brushing. Their breathing synced unintentionally. A little to the left, and murmured. Judith's hands shifted, knuckles grazing Anne's for a fraction of a second. The contact was light but unmistakable. And didn't pull back. Instead, her gaze flicked upward, searching Judith's eyes. Judith's heartbeat stumbled. "Perfect," Anne said softly, though the shelf hadn't moved much at all. A quiet moment fell between them, fragile and full, like a note held longer than expected in a song. Later, they sat on the floor, legs stretched out, drinking tea from mismatched mugs. Anne's mug had a chipped rim, Judith's had a faded mountain print. The jasmine-scented steam curled upward, blending with the soft smell of paint and cinnamon in the room. "So what brought you back home?" Anne asked gently. Judith stirred her tea, watching the light tremble on the surface. "Life. Or, my parents' version of life. They're very conservative. Very certain about who I'm supposed to be." And nodded slowly, something warm and understanding settling in her eyes. "That's heavy." Sometimes it feels like the walls in their house push inward. You don't have to stay there forever. Judith looked at and then, really looked. Her posture relaxed, her expression open in a way few people ever allowed themselves to be. I know, Judith said softly. But for now, it's complicated. And didn't push. She simply leaned back on her hands, her bare feet brushing against Judith's sock-covered ones. The lightest contact. Judith felt the sensation travel up her leg, her pulse quickening for reasons she didn't want to examine too closely. In the days that followed, small rituals formed between them. On Tuesday evenings, they'd accidentally meet in the hallway, Judith getting home from sending job applications, and returning from work at a small art gallery across town. They'd walk to their doors in parallel, keys in hand, exchanging small jokes that gradually shaped themselves into trust. On Thursday, Judith helped Anne carry a heavy package up the stairs. A framed photograph slipped inside, and when Anne unwrapped it to check for damage, Judith saw an image of ocean cliffs under a stormy sky. "You took this?" Judith asked, surprised. And smiled. "Yeah. Ireland. Last fall. It's beautiful. Want to help me hang it?" And so Judith found herself holding a hammer while Anne held the frame, their faces close enough that Judith felt the warmth of Anne's breath on her cheek. The scent of her, jasmine, paint, something uniquely her, wrapped around Judith in a way she didn't know how to step away from. Anne looked at her then, not at the frame. Judith felt her pulse leap. Just for a heartbeat, Anne's face tilted slightly toward hers. The moment hovered, suspended, delicate, trembling with possibility. But Judith pulled in a quick breath and stepped half a pace back. Maybe, a little higher. Anne lowered her gaze, nodding once, but a flicker of something, curiosity, maybe longing, glimmered there before softening. The moment dissolved gently, but not completely. On Friday night, Judith had to attend the family dinner she'd been dreading. When she returned to the hallway hours later, emotionally drained and smelling vaguely of pot roast and heavy perfume, she saw Anne sitting cross-legged in front of her own door, sketchbook in her lap. "Hey," Anne said softly, standing. "You okay?" Judith wanted to say no. Wanted to say everything felt too tight, too heavy, too scripted. Instead, she whispered, "It was a long night." And stepped closer, not touching, but close enough that Judith felt the warmth radiating off her skin. "Want company?" Judith nodded before she could overthink it. They sat together on the hallway floor, backs against the wall, the dim overhead light flickering softly. Judith's shoulder brushed Anne's, lightly at first, then a little more as she relaxed. Silence wrapped around them, not empty but comforting. Anne turned her head slightly, her voice barely above a whisper. "We could do something tomorrow, if you want. A walk. Coffee. Something easy." Judith felt something settle warmly in her chest. "I'd like that." And smiled, and the glow of the hallway light caught the edge of her cheekbone. "Then tomorrow." A simple promise. Soft, open-ended. A thread pulling them closer. Judith stood, her hand briefly hovering near Anne's as if guided by a quiet impulse. Their fingers came close, close enough to feel heat, close enough to imagine the touch without crossing the line. Judith met Anne's eyes, breath unsteady. Anne's voice softened. "Tomorrow, Judith." Judith nodded, her heart loud in her chest. "Tomorrow." She turned the key in her door, stepping inside as the warm hallway light washed over her one last time. The door clicked shut gently, not fully closed, not fully open, just enough space for something new to slip through. Judith barely slept the night before. She kept replaying the moment in the hallway, the softness in Anne's voice, the warmth in the promise of tomorrow, the way their fingers had hovered close enough to feel the shape of something neither had dared touch. When she finally managed to rest, the sunlight was already seeping through her curtains, pale and gentle, brushing the room with a quiet glow that made everything feel slightly more possible. She showered slowly, letting the warm water calm the trembling under her skin. Her parents were out early, leaving behind the smell of brewed coffee and the faint echo of their usual expectations. Judith opened her closet and stared at her clothes, unsure why her hands hesitated. She chose something simple, jeans, a soft sweater, but when she caught her reflection in the mirror, something inside her tightened. There was a faint, almost invisible tremor of anticipation behind her ribs. She felt it like the faint click of Anne's door that first day, small, but impossible to ignore. She stepped into the hallway right as Anne opened her own door, adjusting a scarf around her neck. The fabric was a deep blue, soft and slightly frayed at the ends, catching the morning light. Anne looked up, her eyes briefly widening as if she, too, had been waiting for this exact moment. "Morning," Anne said quietly, voice warm but softer than usual. A deliberate softness. "Hi," Judith replied, pushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Ready?" "Yeah. I thought we could walk to the park. It's only about 15 minutes. They moved side by side down the hallway, their steps syncing naturally. Outside, the air carried the crisp scent of early autumn, cool, with a hint of something sweet drifting from a nearby bakery. The wind brushed against their jackets, sometimes guiding them slightly closer, sometimes pulling them apart. Judith felt the electricity of that invisible thread between them tighten and loosen, like breathing. Halfway to the park, Anne's hand brushed Judith's, the lightest, most accidental touch. But instead of pulling away quickly, both of them hesitated. Judith's eyes flicked toward Anne's hand, and she saw Anne do the same. A silent acknowledgement. A small, shared intake of breath. Then Anne gently shifted her fingers so the back of her hand grazed Judith's again. The contact was brief, almost non-existent, but it rode a wave of warmth up Judith's arm. When they reached the park, the morning sun filtered through the trees, painting patches of light across the ground. Leaves fluttered gently from branches, creating a slow, golden rain around them. The scent of damp earth mixed with the mild fragrance of pine. Children played in the distance. Someone walked a dog whose collar jingled faintly. They strolled along a winding path, occasionally leaning close to point out something, a squirrel on a branch, a child flying a kite, a couple sharing a quiet bench. Each time they leaned in, the warmth between them pulsed stronger, a rhythm neither was ready to name. "You look lighter today," Anne murmured at one point, her voice barely above the breeze. Judith's breath caught. "Maybe I am." Anne turned her head at that, studying her face with a softness that made Judith's pulse throb gently in her throat. The moment stretched, quiet, transparent, until Anne smiled. "Good." They sat on a bench overlooking a small pond, where the sunlight shimmered on the surface like glass. A duck quacked loudly, breaking Judith's brief nervous laugh. Anne leaned back, arms folded loosely, her thigh brushing Judith's. Judith didn't move away. Neither did Anne. The warmth from that single point of contact seeped into her slowly, deliberately. "You know," Anne said, "I'm glad you came today." Judith turned, meeting Anne's eyes. "I'm glad too." And then, as naturally as sunlight sliding across a floor, Anne reached up and gently moved a stray strand of hair from Judith's cheek. The gesture was soft, deliberate, and Judith felt her breath leave her chest in a trembling whisper. She didn't lean in, but she didn't lean away either. The edges of the world seemed to blur slightly, leaving only the warmth of Anne's fingertips and the soft perfume of bergamot drifting between them. Judith's voice, when it came, was quiet and thinner than she intended. "Anne, you okay?" Anne asked, thumb barely grazing Judith's temple. Judith nodded, though her breath wavered. I've never felt like this." And didn't close the distance. She let Judith see the question in her eyes first. A question without pressure. A question with space inside it. the moment didn't end there. Later, at a small coffee shop near the edge of the park, they found themselves squeezed into a tiny corner booth with mismatched pillows. The warm smell of roasted beans hung in the air, along with faint music playing from an old radio. And ordered chamomile. Judith ordered a latte, her hands still slightly unsteady. As they waited, Anne's knee brushed hers beneath the table. When Judith didn't pull back, and let her leg rest there. Not pressing, just there, firm and warm, a touch Judith felt long after she stopped thinking about it. Their drinks arrived, steaming softly, sending curls of scented air upward. Judith wrapped her hands around the mug, grounding herself in the heat. "What are you thinking?" Anne asked gently. Judith stared into her latte foam for a second. "That being around you feels like learning a new language. I understand it, but it scares me that I do." Anne's expression softened in a way that made Judith's stomach flutter. "It scares me too." Judith blinked, startled. "It does?" "Yeah. I didn't expect this." Their knees pressed a little closer. Judith noticed Anne's breathing deepen, noticed her own mimic it. She couldn't remember the last time someone looked at her without expecting a version of her she could never quite give. After coffee, they walked back slowly as the afternoon sun warmed the pavement. Judith's hand brushed Anne's again, not accidental this time. Her fingers curled slightly, waiting. Anne paused, watching her. A soft, hesitant moment passed, 2 breaths long, maybe 3, before Anne slipped her fingers between Judith's. Judith felt everything all at once: heat, trembling, fear, clarity. They walked the next few blocks like that, hands intertwined, steps synchronized, hearts trembling in the quiet space between them, until Judith froze. A couple from her parents' church walked by on the opposite side of the street. Judith instinctively let go, pulse spiking. And stopped immediately, gaze searching Judith's face but offering no judgment. "It's okay," she whispered, voice steady. Judith swallowed hard, guilt and fear tightening her throat. "I'm sorry. They know my family." And nodded slowly. "I get it." But something fragile cracked beneath the surface, like a leaf crushed underfoot. Not broken, just complicated. When they reached their building, the hallway smelled faintly of fresh paint from a renovation downstairs. A low, warm light glowed above them. They stopped in front of their doors, facing each other in the quiet. Judith's heart pounded so loudly she swore and could hear it. And stepped closer, just enough that Judith felt the warmth radiating from her body, the soft scent of jasmine rising between them. She lifted her hand, stopping just shy of Judith's cheek. A silent question. Judith leaned in. Only a fraction. But enough. Anne's fingers brushed her jaw. Judith exhaled shakily and took another half step, her forehead nearly touching Anne's. The world narrowed to light, breath, warmth. Judith whispered, "Can I?" And closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again, clearer and softer than Judith had ever seen. "Yes." Judith leaned in first. Their lips met gently, barely a second, featherlight, delicate. A warm tremble passed between them. Anne's hand slid to Judith's neck, not pulling, just resting there. A reassurance. Consent in the form of warmth. The kiss was brief, careful, trembling, tender enough to break something quietly open in Judith's chest. When they pulled back, their foreheads stayed close for a lingering moment, breath mingling. Judith let out a shaky laugh. "Oh." And smiled softly, thumb brushing Judith's jaw. "Yeah." The silence between them filled with something bright, fragile, powerful. But then, as Judith stepped back, reality returned like a sudden gust of cold air. Her parents. The expectations. The fear. The hallway felt tighter. I don't know how to handle this," Judith whispered, panic curling through the edges of her voice. Anne's smile dimmed but didn't disappear. You don't have to know everything tonight. Judith nodded, but the weight of the moment pressed heavily on her. Without fully meaning to, she stepped back again, then one step more, hand gripping her keys too tightly. I need a minute. And didn't reach for her. She simply nodded, eyes full of understanding and a hint of hurt. Take your time, Judith. Judith opened her door, the cool air from inside brushing her skin. She glanced back once, at Anne, at the space between them, at the quiet warmth lingering in the hallway. Then she slipped inside and closed the door. Not fully. Not firmly. Just enough. Judith barely left her room the next morning. The kiss still lingered on her lips, soft, trembling, impossibly delicate, and at the same time, her entire body felt wrapped in a tight knot. She kept pacing, stopping every few seconds to stare at the door, the familiar symbol that had followed her since the day Anne moved in. Half open or half shut, depending on the hour. Depending on her fear. She pressed her forehead to the wooden frame, letting the coolness ground her. Her mind flickered through everything, her parents' expectations, the subtle threats disguised as advice, the way her father spoke about the right kind of people, the way her mother had cried the last time Judith pushed back. She could almost hear her mother's voice in the back of her head, gentle, suffocating, immovable. And underneath all of that, Anne's whisper. Yes. Judith covered her face with her hands. Around noon, her mother called. Judith answered out of instinct. You didn't come down for breakfast, her mother said, voice too sweet, too careful. Everything okay? Judith swallowed. Just tired. Tired from what? You don't have work yet. Judith closed her eyes at the sting. I'm looking. I sent applications all week. You know, if you accepted the internship your uncle offered. I don't want that internship. Silence. Heavy, pointed, cold. You're being difficult again, Judith. Her throat tightened. I'm just trying to figure things out. Her mother sighed, a long sound full of disappointment. Come home for dinner tonight. Your aunt will be there. She can help you with opportunities. Judith hesitated, gaze drifting to her half-open door. The thin line of hallway light resting on the floor felt like a quiet plea. Okay, she whispered. After the call, she sank onto her bed, her pulse unsteady. She could still feel the warm ghost of Anne's hand on her neck. Still hear the softness in her voice, the care in her breath. But then an echo cut through her memories, her mother's sigh, the pressure coiling back around her spine. She felt pulled in two directions, the life she had been trained to uphold and the life that felt alive only when she stood close to Anne. Hours passed in slow motion. She heard Anne's door open once, briefly, followed by footsteps heading downstairs. Judith held her breath, wanting to follow but frozen in place. The sound of the door closing behind and echoed like something slipping away. By late afternoon, Judith forced herself to leave for the family dinner. The sun was low, painting the hallway in warm gold. As she stepped outside her apartment, she saw Anne coming up the stairs carrying a small plant in a terracotta pot, a gentle shade of green spilling over the rim. Their eyes met instantly. Anne slowed, her expression softening, hope flickering first, then concern when Judith didn't smile back. Hey, Anne said gently, taking a step closer. I didn't see you today. Judith swallowed. I had a lot on my mind. Anne nodded, searching her face with quiet patience. About last night? Judith's breath caught. She looked down at the plant, at the way Anne cradled it like something fragile. Yeah, she whispered. And exhaled softly. Do you regret it? Judith's eyes snapped up, her heart clenching at the hint of hurt in Anne's expression. No. She hesitated, her voice trembling with fear she hated admitting. I don't know how to be this version of myself outside of you. Anne's face softened, but a shadow passed behind her eyes. You don't have to be anything for me. I just want you to be honest with yourself. The honesty in the words made Judith's pulse twist painfully. Her fingers brushed the strap of her purse, she tightened her grip. I have to go to dinner, she managed. And nodded slowly. With your family? Yeah. The silence that followed felt thick, humming with everything unsaid. Judith wanted to touch her. Wanted to close that tiny space between them. But instead she took a small step back. And noticed. She always noticed. Judith, and murmured, voice breaking a little. If you need space. I'll give you space. Just don't disappear without telling me. Judith's throat tightened. I'm not disappearing. I'm just. Another hesitation. Another crack in the words she could never finish. Figuring things out, and finished softly. Judith nodded. And stepped aside, letting her pass. But right as Judith walked by, and reached out instinctively, fingers brushing Judith's wrist, barely there, but warm enough to stop Judith mid-stride. She froze. Anne's touch retreated immediately. Sorry. Judith shook her head quickly. No, I didn't mind. The air thickened. Their breathing synced without them realizing. Anne's voice dropped. Come back after dinner. If you want. My door will be open a little. Judith's heart jolted at the symbol, the recurring image they'd quietly built between them. A door not fully open, not fully shut. A door waiting. She whispered, I'll try. Anne's smile was small but tender. That's enough. Judith left with that promise tucked inside her ribs. The family dinner was worse than she expected. Her aunt asked invasive questions about her future. Her mother kept fixing Judith's posture at the table. Her father made comments about people who lose their way in the city, glancing at Judith each time. Someone mentioned the neighbor's daughter who turned out wrong, and the room shifted in a way that made Judith's stomach twist. The lights felt too bright. The air too stale. The walls too close. Her phone buzzed once in her pocket. She didn't check it, but she felt it burn against her skin like a lifeline. Later, outside, the cold night air hit her face like reality splintering. She leaned against her car, exhaling a shaky breath. When she finally checked her phone, she saw a message from Anne. I'm here. Don't hide from yourself tonight. Judith closed her eyes, heart lifting and sinking at the same time. But then, another buzz. Her mother. You rushed out. Are you okay? Please don't make a scene. Come back home tonight. We need to talk. Judith stared at the two messages, her breath turning uneven. The world tilted, the two paths, the two demands, the two versions of her. She drove back to the apartment in silence, gripping the wheel, her pulse thundering. When she reached her hallway, the air was dimmer, softer. The lights hummed low. And there it was. Anne's door. A crack of warm light spilling onto the floor. Half open, exactly like the first day. A mirror of her own conflict. Judith's footsteps were silent as she approached. She could hear faint music inside Anne's apartment, soft guitar, steady and patient. Judith lifted her hand toward the door. Her fingers hovered inches from it. She could step inside. She could close it. She could open it fully. She could walk away. Her breath trembled. Then, slowly, painfully, she pulled her hand back. Not closing the distance. Not crossing the threshold. Just breathing, suspended. Anne's shadow moved inside, maybe stepping closer to the door, maybe waiting. Judith took a half step back, guilt and longing tangled painfully in her chest. She whispered, barely audible, "I'm not ready." Not closing the door. Not opening it. Just letting it stay where it was. She pulled out her phone, typed a message. "I'm home." She hesitated, thumb hovering over send, breath unsteady. Then she deleted it. The light from Anne's apartment flickered softly across the hallway floor. Judith stood there a moment longer, aching with everything she wanted and everything she feared, before turning toward her own apartment. She opened her door slowly. Left it slightly, deliberately open. Then stepped inside. The hallway was quiet in the early morning, the kind of soft quiet that made every small sound feel amplified. Judith stepped out of her apartment slowly, her heart still echoing the weight of the night before. Her door remained slightly open, a sliver of space letting out a thin line of warm light onto the carpet. It mirrored Anne's in a way that made her chest tighten. Two doors, two cracks of light, two women waiting for themselves as much as for each other. She stood there for a long moment, breathing shallowly, staring at the glow under Anne's door. The air smelled faintly of fresh paint and someone's warm breakfast down the hall. Her fingers twitched once, twice, like they wanted to knock, but her feet stayed rooted. Then something changed. Inside Anne's apartment, a shadow moved. The soft guitar music she had heard the night before faded, replaced by the sound of footsteps approaching. Judith's breath caught as the door slowly opened wider, not all the way, just enough for Anne's silhouette to appear, barefoot, hair tied loosely, wrapped in a sweater she must have thrown on without thinking. And didn't speak. She simply looked at Judith with an expression that carried hope, hurt, patience, and fear all at once, an expression that looked too much like Judith's own reflection. That was the breaking point. Judith stepped forward. And her voice wavered, but it was real, unfiltered. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you." Anne's shoulders softened, but she kept her distance as if afraid a single wrong move might shatter the moment. "You're scared. I get it. I do. But I don't know where I stand with you. I don't know if you want me close or far." Judith shook her head, her pulse trembling. "Close. I want you close. I just didn't know how to choose myself. Not until last night." A flicker of warmth crossed Anne's eyes. "And now?" Judith took a slow step closer, the hallway light catching the fine tremble in her hands. "Now I know that hiding is worse than any judgment. Hiding from you feels like hiding from the only thing that ever felt true." She watched Anne's breath catch, watched her steady herself. "Judith," and whispered, and the sound alone softened something deep inside her. "Come in." Judith stepped through the threshold, the door closing softly behind her, not halfway this time, not uncertain, but gently, intentionally, with a finality that didn't feel like fear. The room smelled like jasmine and early morning air. Sunlight poured through the windows, scattering reflections across the hardwood floor. Anne walked toward the kitchen island and leaned against it, fingers curling around the counter's edge. Judith followed her slowly, as if moving too quickly might break the delicate new layer of honesty between them. "I didn't sleep much," Anne admitted softly. "Me neither," Judith replied. "I kept thinking about the door. Yours. Mine. How neither of us closed anything." Anne's lips lifted slightly. "Maybe we were waiting for the same thing." Judith stepped closer still, the warmth from Anne's body reaching her even from a foot away. She raised her hand, slow, trembling, deliberate, and brushed a strand of hair behind Anne's ear. The gesture felt like a promise, gentle but full of meaning. Anne exhaled shakily. "Are you sure about this?" Judith nodded, the movement small but steady. "I'm sure about you." And closed her eyes for a second, as if absorbing the words into her bones. When she opened them again, there was something different there, something open, brave, unguarded. Their foreheads gently met, soft as the brush of leaves in early autumn. They stayed like that, breathing the same slow breath, letting their fears quiet down between them. And whispered, "If you kiss me again, don't run afterward." Judith let out a faint laugh that trembled at the edges. "I won't. Not this time." The kiss this time was slow and warm, full of emotion but still tender enough to carry their lingering caution. A soft pull, a gentle surrender, a quiet untying of all the knots that had held them apart. Anne's hands rested lightly on Judith's waist, not gripping, just holding space for closeness. Judith's fingers brushed Anne's jaw, tracing the quiet curve of her smile between breaths. When they parted, their noses brushed, their hands remained connected, and the air felt newly shaped around them. "I think I'm still scared," Judith whispered. "Me too," Anne admitted. "But I'm not leaving." A small, relieved laugh escaped Anne's lips. "Good." They moved around the apartment like two people rediscovering gravity together. And brewed chamomile tea. Judith opened the blinds, letting the warm light spill across the walls. They talked in quiet, unhurried sentences, the kind that didn't need explanations. Judith told Anne about her family dinner, about the disappointment, the pressure, the way fear had pressed into her ribs. Anne listened patiently, fingers brushing Judith's shoulder every so often in silent comfort. "You don't have to choose between love and your family," Anne said gently. "You can choose yourself first. Everything else comes after." Judith nodded slowly. "For the first time, I want to build something for me. Something real." Anne's mouth curved into a softer smile. "Then let's build something. Together." That word, together, settled in Judith's chest like light filling a dark room. She looked around the apartment, at Anne's half-finished paintings, at the photographs leaning against the wall, at the camera on the counter. "Your photographs," Judith said. "They tell stories. And your writing does too." Judith blinked at her, surprised. "My writing? You told me you studied journalism. Why did you stop?" Judith swallowed. "My parents didn't think it was stable. They wanted something respectable. Something predictable." And leaned closer. "Then maybe it's time to be unpredictable." The words settled between them like a seed ready to sprout. Hours later, they sat cross-legged on the living room floor, surrounded by Anne's portfolio and Judith's old articles pulled from her laptop. The light shifted from morning gold to afternoon warmth to the faint blue of early evening. "You know," Anne said, tapping a photograph of city protests Judith had written about in college, "this could be something. You and me. Picture and words. A photojournalism duo." The idea lit something in Judith's chest that felt dangerously close to joy. "You think so?" "I know so." Judith met her eyes, the spark unmistakable. "I want that. With you." Anne's smile was slow, blooming, warm. "Then let's find a place. A real place. Our place." By the end of the week, they toured an apartment across town. The building was old but full of charm, arched doorways, wide windows, exposed brick. When the real estate agent stopped in front of one unit in particular, Judith felt a flutter she couldn't name. "This one is number 50, the agent said. Newly renovated." Anne's eyes shot to Judith's instantly. A silent connection passed between them, electric and sweet. 50. A coincidence that didn't feel like coincidence at all. They walked in. The light hit the hardwood floor beautifully. The air smelled faintly of fresh paint and possibility. Judith touched the doorframe lightly, not as an anchor this time, but as a beginning. "What do you think?" And asked softly, stepping closer. Judith slipped her fingers between Anne's, their hands finding each other easily now. "I think this is home." And leaned in, forehead against Judith's. "Then let's build our life here. Judith closed her eyes, savoring the quiet truth of the moment. She felt herself expanding, softening, stepping into a version of herself she had once feared and now finally embraced. And then, slowly, she opened her eyes and looked at the door, their new door. Not half open. Not cracked. Not uncertain. But open wide, sunlight spilling through as if welcoming them both. A mirror of the first door she had ever seen and behind, but this time filled with warmth, courage, and choice. Sometimes, Judith thought, courage isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's the simple act of choosing the life that feels like your own. And sometimes, it's stepping through a door you once thought you'd never dare to open. We're so glad you made it this far. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to Secret Garden Stories, leaving a comment, and sharing it with friends, forums, and social media. Your support helps this channel grow and build a world with more love and less prejudice. Tulip. Thank you for being here.